All right, fantastic. Welcome, welcome. I'm Terry. This is How to Heal and Find Inner Peace in the Aftermath of Divorce so you can feel confident AF, even if you're anxious to trust again or you have a high conflict ex. Worked with many people in many different situations. So I just want to welcome you. So my intention is to let you know that there are some keys to finding inner peace in this next chapter. My own unhealed childhood abandonment wounds contributed to my divorce, the destruction of my marriage, but it also was the start of my healing journey. And I learned a lot of strategies and tools and things along the way. And now I help other people. And my intention is to help give you the keys on how to heal toxic relationships, unresolved childhood abandonment wounds, and unresolved trauma so that you create amazing new relationships going forward in this new chapter. And then I'll share how we can further work together at the end of this class. So just so I get a gauge on where everyone is, in the chat box, I'd love for you to tell me your biggest struggle, your biggest challenge right now. Is it feeling not good enough? Is it unhealthy boundaries or people pleasing or feeling lonely? What is your biggest struggle? And on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, not really a big deal, and 10 being, oh my gosh, this is stopping me. I think about it night and day. It's keeping me up at night, causing anxiety. So just so I can tailor our class to what it is that you need, I'm curious what your biggest challenge, your biggest issue post-divorce, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly it's affecting you, from 1 being not really to 10 being horrendous. So if you just put that in the chat box, I'd love to know what your challenges are. Second guessing and feeling fatigued. Well, those two can definitely be related for sure. Going to be addressing that kind of like right away. Anyone else want to share in the chat box? Boundaries. It's a 4. I'm finding it a lot easier now that I'm not around my ex. Yeah, having that distance away from our ex and a toxic person certainly helps us for sure. All right, okay. Starting over at 41, since I've been married since 20. Yeah, so you've spent more time being married and part of a couple than you were as an individual. So yeah, it's definitely, that can be difficult to start over. Definitely second guessing myself, not trusting my intuition. Yeah, second guessing. Okay. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about why that is exactly. Yeah. Okay, great. It is hard to find our new identity post-divorce and redo everything. Okay, so a little bit about me. Thank you all so much for sharing. Whew, I'm just going to take a breath, and then I'm going to kind of share a little bit of my story. While I'm taking a breath, I just want to make sure everyone's in that wants to be in today. Whew. Nice big inhale, exhale. All right, a little bit about me. You heard me talk about my Southern accent at the beginning of our class. I grew up just a poor country girl from Virginia. That's where I'm from. And my mom was divorced. I think I was around 4 years old when my dad and mom split. And what few memories I have of them together is pretty chaos, a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing. And we had very little. So my upbringing was very unstable in regards to where we lived, food scarcity, just not feeling safe. I was sexually abused when I was 6 years old by a family member. And my biological father, who I don't even talk to now, that he's out of the picture completely. But I think during my childhood, maybe a handful of times, there were some interactions with him. And those interactions were pretty negative and left pretty negative impressions on me as a young girl. And now, as a grown up, looking back, I realized he was probably a functioning alcoholic, because his reason for not visiting us or visiting his daughters growing up was because he was drinking and he didn't want to drink and drive. And of course, my answer to that is, well, why not just stop drinking and come see us? But so all of that chaos, abandonment, like feeling not good enough, all that scarcity, having a mom who was, just ill prepared to be raising children on her own, and she had no education of her own, and little work skills too. So it just, we grew up in kind of a chaotic, insecure childhood. And I grew up and actually became pretty high achieving. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I've gone on, got a graduate degree, postgraduate degree. So on the outside, I'm very high functioning, very type A, go getter. But on the inside, my relationships were a hot, hot mess. My marriage fell apart when my own kids were 4 and 2. I was not a good wife. I was needy. I was insecure. I was controlling. And one of the things that I look back on too was like, I was a never ending pit of like insecurity. I can never get enough reassurance. I needed constant reassurance. I needed lots of love all the time. And there's a lot of chaos within me, and I kind of spread that throughout the relationship. And I ended up divorced with 2 young children, had a horrible divorce, lost my mom, was hit by a van, lost my home, became homeless, almost lost my job because I was just, out of control, crazy mentally from the divorce, chaotic. And that, though, was also the beginning of my healing journey. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because I wouldn't change a thing, because that for me was like a pivotal point in my life. It was the lowest point, but also like the starting of becoming the happiest I've ever been. And now here I am today. I am remarried to a wonderful, sexy New York Italian. So the kids can make fun of both of our accent. We have expanded our family. I have co-authored 2 women's empowerment books that have insights and tips for overcoming setbacks such as divorce, loss, those types of things. So if you're interested in that, let me know about that. And I have traveled the country, virtually have been all over the world, but pre-COVID, I've been all over the country giving speeches, presentations, meeting my personal heroes on how to heal, particularly from divorce. And what I'm most proud of, though, is how I put my relationship back together with my ex-husband. He and I are, we get along fantastic. That's his wife. We're besties, as my teen daughter calls us. And we just co-parent really, really, really well. And it would not have been possible. He didn't do anything different. She doesn't do anything. It's about how I show up in those relationships. So we're able to co-parent like rock stars, because I've done the inner work and I keep this relationship moving forward. We keep it focused on our kids. So that's what I'm really most proud of, is how we've been able to create this really great family together, co-parenting family. So what I really want to emphasize here is that the real reason you're feeling stuck and that you feel like you're struggling to second guess yourself, you're struggling with boundaries and not finding high quality partners, perhaps in this dating arena, or your relationships are strained, is because you've got unresolved abandonment issues that are impairing your confidence, self-worth, dating, intimate relationships, but ultimately your peace of mind. Because when you show up in those relationships as your most confident, most peaceful self, then those relationships flourish, even with high conflict people. All right. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about like what is an abandonment wound, because I think there's a misconception about what those really are. So, perhaps you are struggling with boundaries. All right, give me like a thumbs up in the chat box if this maybe you got to pay close attention to. So if you are struggling with boundaries, perhaps you're constantly feeling anxious. You're constantly second guessing yourself. You feel like you're a failure. You feel like everything's your fault, or you feel like you're not quite good enough. No matter what you do, it's not good enough. You never feel, you're always looking for the next best thing. Or you're a people pleaser and you don't have healthy boundaries. You struggle with setting those boundaries. And that leads to feeling full of resentment, full of anger, being passive aggressive. Or what I see with people, it's not so much the divorce with a lot of my clients is when they kind of like, need that extra support and come to work with me. But it's when they've had that toxic relationship and then that next toxic relationship and they realize, oh my gosh, the common denominator right here is me. I think it's different. And every time I keep getting into these relationships with people that I'm settling for less. I even see, particularly with women, they settle for less personally and professionally. They devalue themselves. They don't ask for what they're worth at work. They're scared to speak up. They're scared to show up in their authentic selves in all areas of their life. So people pleasing is a big one. Okay, I got a thumbs up here. This is resonating with some people. Yeah. So let's talk about why that is. Okay, and how that comes to be. The reason you're a people pleaser, you struggle with boundaries, you're struggling to trust yourself is because you've got unhealed abandonment wounds. And it doesn't mean necessarily, maybe, you didn't have an alcoholic father who completely abandoned you and your family afterwards, but it's having an emotionally unavailable parent. And again, this is not a blame game. I want to, get that set out right away because I think my mom was phenomenal. She's like the strongest woman I've ever met in my whole life. And I look up to her. She's like a true goddess. But at the same time, her upbringing was so traumatic and so, I don't even know all the trauma, but what I have learned has been, it's close to child abuse, which what we would consider today as child abuse. And so our parents do the best that they can, but they don't have necessarily the skill sets to give us the emotional safety that we need. And particularly if you were a child that was particularly sensitive, because that's what I see with a lot of my clients. It's not that they had bad parents, that it's just that they were kind of more on the highly sensitive side of things. And so that parent was kind of unable to give them, because our parents aren't instructed in that. They weren't given what they needed as children. And so sometimes you might have a parent who had mental illness or who had their own traumas, alcoholism or substance abuse, very emotionally unavailable. Maybe they were distant. So what happens is you seek validation from others because your emotional needs were not met as a child. So because you weren't taught to trust yourself and tune in your intuition, or if you did speak up, you were told to be quiet. And some of this can be conditioning too, because I'm old school Southern. In certain cultures, like children should be seen and not heard. So it can be culturally conditioned as well of like not allowing children to have a voice, not allowing them to express their emotions. And what happens is we get dysregulated and our nervous system gets so out of whack that you never really learn how to feel safe and secure in your own self and express yourself and feel validated as yourself. So again, you look to other people because that's okay. I got to look to other people to feel like I'm good enough. Perhaps your own desires and needs were suppressed as a child. You weren't allowed to trust yourself. So I have a client, Sue. She was a previous client, and she was adopted, and great parents. Again, great parents. I'm not blaming parents, but at the same time, they were very, very religiously super conservative. And she was this very kind of a little wild, a little rebellious, kind of artsy child. And, because she wasn't allowed to express her own desires, her own needs, and she was seen as the black sheep in her family, she really struggled to trust herself. And where this came out was particularly in those abandonment wounds and in her dating life. So in her dating life, we had just started working together, and she had just realized, because we had just started working on this abandonment wound, that she was seeing this guy. And what I tell everybody when they're dating post-divorce, you don't look for how that person makes you feel. You look for someone's actions aligning with their words. Okay. And so it was a couple of weeks and I heard his name again. And I was like, well, whoa. What's going on with Robert? I thought that was over because we had already discussed how his actions and his words were not aligning. He was saying he was going to give her time, but he wasn't following through. He was, what do you call it? Just an unreliable guy. And, if you're a single mom, you need a guy that you can trust and you can rely on. And when we dug deeper, what we realized, it was that abandonment wound. He made her feel accepted, which is what she never felt as an adopted child, wild child, black sheep in her own family. So what we did was reparent her and give her the tools and the strategies that she needed. So she wasn't looking for a man to fill that void within her. And the other thing is too, if you do have repeated toxic relationships, if you were in a long-term relationship, which I know two of you here we're in very long-term toxic relationships, you become very dysregulated. It causes that nervous system to become out of whack. And so you don't know how to trust yourself. You don't feel safe and secure. You don't trust your own intuition. And so there are some real things that you can do to regulate yourself and also tune into that intuition and tune into your own needs and desires. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. All right. Anyone want to shoot in the chat box about that? Is that a thumbs up for me? Is that resonating? Are you feeling like, okay, I get that. I understand. How's that going with the boundaries and the trust? Especially those toxic relationships. Like I said, a lot of my clients don't come to me after the divorce. They think it's the divorce and then they get into toxic relationship. And I was like, oh, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. And then they become less regulated, less able to trust themselves, deeper into those abandonment wounds for sure. Awesome. Thumbs up. All right. Okay. All right. So this is me. We're going to get into my story a little bit here. If you feel chronically lonely and maybe even a sense of like deep sadness, like never really feeling content or good enough or not enough, that was for me just this kind of ongoing loneliness. I mean, I was deeply lonely when I was married, so the divorce for me was like, I had to figure something out. But the good news is, if you have these underlying feelings, you feel lonely, you feel like not good enough, or you just have this sense of sadness that just carries through you deeply. These are great. This is good news, right? Because this is an indicator of where you need to heal. So the trigger, that ex that triggers you, that boss who's like, on you and you're not sure why, like you can't walk away from work from it, those judgments, when someone says something about you and you can't let it go, those are indicators where you need to heal. So if you understand that the negative emotion is there to teach you something about yourself, and it's serving a purpose in your healing, then you can let it go. That's the great thing. So, it's unconditional welcome of these toxic emotional, because the more we deny it, the more resist it, like I was staying married and constantly asking my husband, reassure me, tell me you love me, da 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 da. When it wasn't him, for me, my loneliness was the start of my journey, because as soon as I got like separated, I'm telling you, I just wanted to go out right away and go meet men and have them tell me I was pretty and tell me I'm smart and funny and all that good stuff. And that was kind of like my aha moment of like, oh my gosh, like you're not even divorced yet, and you want to go out there and meet a new man like immediately. And that was the one of the healthiest things. I did a couple of good things during my divorce. And just sitting with that loneliness was really the key, because what I learned was I just said, I just surrendered. I just consciously surrendered, and I sat in that strange woman's basement. Like I said, I didn't have a home at the time. I was living with some friend of a friend of a friend in her basement. And I just sat and watched sad documentaries night after night, just crying myself to sleep, holding my babies. But for me, it was like that awareness of like, girl, you are looking for a man to make you feel good, because it was my aha moment. It's like, because your own father didn't love you, so you feel like you're not lovable. And that like really hit home. If my own father didn't love me, how could anyone love me? I was looking for that man to fill that void, to make me feel lovable. And that's what I was doing with my ex-husband, was constantly wanting him to make me feel good, make me happy. And also when he didn't do what I wanted, or he did something different, or something that like was all, that controlling part of me. And again, that goes to that safety and security too, of having a sympathetic nervous system that was constantly off. That's what that control is. You think if you control the external stuff, then you feel good on the inside. But the truth is, that's just a Band-Aid on a broken bone. You have to soothe that nervous system and feel calm within. And what I realized is that, for me, it was having that father, like that left us after the divorce, but also just having a mother that just, she struggled emotionally. She wasn't outwardly affectionate, never gave any praise, just a critical kind of a woman. And so having a parent like that, where the love is conditional, where like you have to earn my love, you have to do things a certain way, you have to be a certain way, that is an abandonment wound. Or having a dysfunctional parent relationship, where maybe your parent was immature or unable to give you what you were, and you had to be the parent. Maybe you had to parent your own parent. That leaves you with abandonment wounds. I've had a lot of clients who come to me, they have great two-parent households. So they, I had one in particular, Chris, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I had great parents. They loved me. But when we dug in deeply, he had two specific traumatic events that like left him completely dysregulated. And then two huge abandonment wounds from parents who absolutely would take away their affection, take away their attention if he didn't do exactly what they wanted him to do. And so that was one wound. But also there was this underlying resentment against him, and he had picked up on it. Children are smart, and we pick up when our parents aren't fully present, or when they resent us, or when they're burdened or stressed. And we always make it about us as children, even if it's not. And even if as adults, we can rationalize it. Like I can tell you right now, like, oh, my mom, she suffered so much trauma. She's so strong. She's so great. Yes. So I'm not blaming her. I know that on an intellectual level, but on an energetic and on a like deep emotional level, that wound still needs to be filled. And the good news is we can reparent ourselves and give ourselves what we need. So what will happen is the loneliness, the chronic loneliness is really, it's about you not being lovable. It's really about you feeling unworthy, that you don't matter. And that's really what the fundamental feeling of loneliness is. And once you resolve that and you know, and you give yourself that unconditional love, that unconditional acceptance, you know, I'm not lonely anymore. Now, every once in a while, will it get like triggered or I'll notice, I'm like, huh, what's that about? I get curious. I have all my tools in my toolbox and I just, you know, figure out what I need to do. And I dig a little deeper and feel more content and feel happier. All right, anybody feeling like that's resonating with the loneliness? Anybody struggle with loneliness? I know we got some second guessing for sure, and the boundaries for sure. Yeah, yeah, okay. An emoji. Can't go wrong with the emojis, right? Yeah, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. But I think that so many people after divorce, they think that divorce is the answer, and then they realize, oh my gosh, I'm all by myself, and I'm with these feelings. What do I do? What does this mean? And if we're willing to look at it and heal it, it is really is the next step to your next alignment. All right. So, how many of you have someone in your life? Maybe it's your ex-husband. For all women here who are married. So, how are you triggered by your ex? Write in the chat box. What's something that your ex does that triggers the hell out of you? Or maybe if your ex is not in your life, maybe it's someone else that does something that triggers the hell out of you. This should be, he wants to control everything and he wants everything his way. Okay. All right. Yes. Oh, I'm trying to think. I think I just, okay. So that reminds me of something that it's not in this, but like those triggers are like mirrors of things that we need to work on within ourselves too. So their behavior is exposing a wound in us that still needs to be healed. You know, one of my favorite like spiritual teachers is Peter Cronin. He talks about like life will present you with people and events to reveal where you still need healing. So for many of us, it's the divorce. That was me for sure, right? And it's people. So that person that is triggering you, that loneliness or that situation that you can't escape, it's just revealing layers where you still need healing. So it's a controlling ex, a coworker that's immature. Ooh, that's a good one, right? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So okay, this is interesting. Thank you for sharing this. My ex is being too nice and apologizing, but then only has the reason of not being happy. So that's really interesting. Like that whole, he sounds like he's got all this guilt and like he knows what he wants, but he's guilty for feeling that way. And you're right. It would just be better if he was a jerk and just like move on instead of kind of dragging you around emotionally. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So it's like, dude, go get your closure. Go let me go. Like for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You guys have some good ones. These are good. So here's the thing. If you understand that it's a trigger for you and to go inward and to find that specific abandonment wound, and again, the abandonment wound is different depending on the circumstance and what it is that you're wanting. So like with Sue, it was that feeling of black sheep and needing acceptance, right? That was just one of them. And with Chris, it was that letting go of being responsible and knowing that he's unconditionally loved. You know, there were layers and layers, and there's layers and layers of it for all of us. So if we understand that these are layers, for me, I'll give you one. I got triggered by a positive comment. It doesn't always have to be like negative, right? It was this positive comment that someone had said on IG. And the interesting thing was my initial response wasn't like, oh, that's wonderful, that's great. I was skeptical. I was like, what, what is this? Why are they saying that? Like it was like, and the truth was I had been bullied, around my middle school years on my looks. I was called a dog. And so that is an area where I had to give myself unconditional acceptance and know that I am beautiful inside and out, right? So that's like another layer of feeling triggered. That's not necessarily always about like the ex or whatever, but when we feel like that like internal trigger of like what's going on, we know that there's layers and there is a precise moment, event, circumstance that caused that. And like I said, the good news is we can reparent ourselves and use conscious intentional tools to repair that so that we are showing up as our best version of ourselves and not feeling less than. He wants to control me. I'm at peace no matter what. I think that's the biggest myth that people have about me and my ex, like that we always agree on everything and everything's always perfect. No, it's not. We don't. But I do always keep our positive intention, which is to put our kids first. I always assume the best, but we do have our moments. And I also understand that some of the things that maybe I don't agree with, I just have grown to accept and understand that there's a acceptance and there may be another truth and another perception. And also when it comes to control, talk about this quite a lot lately about the control issues is when we feel controlled. So that's really interesting because oftentimes the more we try to control things, the more the person resists. And this is a really great example. The more he wants to control you, the more resistant you're going to be. And so it's all about that energetic flow of letting go, accepting what is, and switching that dynamic around would be really, really beneficial in many ways. So, my ex triggered mommy issues. Yes, mommy issues, not feeling heard, not feeling validated. Yes. So, okay. So thank you for sharing that because that was going to be my next example of Linda has mommy issues. And that one of her issues, I don't know if y'all saw my recent post about shadow work, but one of her issues is like her mom had the biggest, like, it wasn't an outward control, but it's this energetic control of always having an agenda. And this is what she wanted. And it didn't matter if something didn't go that way or if the kids needed something different or da da da. It was her way or no other way. There was always, my client describes it as an agenda. Even today, she walks in with an agenda. And the funny thing is with her mom, like she was recently packing for her trip. And so this goes to this, her ex-husband triggered her. So she was recently packing for her trip and her mom came in and had this whole spiel and she was like telling her son what to do and da da da. She just kind of smiled and just like accepted it, embraced it. And then when mom went away, they did their own thing. But in the past, it would have been this whole dynamic of fighting and resistance and, and now she just lets it go. But that reason is because when she first came to me, she came to me because her ex-husband, they freshly like signed their divorce papers. And she was so anxious. She was on the verge of anxiety attacks when his his truck tires would hit the driveway to pick up their son. And that's really what we started initially working on was to stop feeling triggered by her ex-husband so that at least they could have peaceful exchanges between her son and her. And y'all, I'm not kidding. I kid you not. They are going on a trip next week. I was like, look, even I could not have predicted how good this would turn out. We were just hoping for respectful conversation in a driveway, so that they're not fighting at the police station. And here they are hanging out and going on a family vacation together. It's because again, she changed how she was. She shifted those dynamics. and no longer feels triggered by him. And she knows it goes back to those mommy wounds. And so by healing those mommy wounds, even today, her relationship with her mother is so much different. Her relationship with her ex-husband is different. It's so life-changing in so many, many, many ways. So if you can identify exactly how that trigger goes back to your youth, and you understand that the relationship you have with your parents shapes your perception of how all relationships is, how all love is. And sometimes, kind of like my client, she didn't even see that the red flags in her ex-husband, it felt like home. Having a controlling ex-husband felt like home to her. That red flag as we see, but if you grow up in that, that's going to feel comfortable for you. By taking responsibility for how you're showing up in these relationships, you take back control. That's the good news. You're no longer giving up your power to your ex or the boss or the immature worker at your work. You take back control, and they no longer are getting you emotionally upset. You're at peace no matter what they do. So when you identify the exact root of that insecurity and you heal that wound using intentional, conscious, I do strategic inner child healing exercises and intentional tools. It could be journaling, it might be writing a letter, it might be some body work to release something. And then once you do that, you will feel at peace all the time. And here's a nice little testimony from a client. So, okay, so I kind of dipped into that a little bit. So healing is a multifaceted process. And this is where like traditional talk therapy leaves you stuck because it doesn't address the complete picture. We can talk about second guessing ourselves all the time, but until you have done the physical work, the inner work, the reparenting work to soothe that nervous system, then you're going to still second guess yourself and not trust your intuition. I also believe in using a systematic, multifaceted approach to healing. You probably hear that. There are lots of modalities, uncovering what it is that's sabotaging you and giving you the prescription. So I wish I could give you a pill. Like, here's, $10 a pill, take this twice a day, call me back in 3 months. I wish I could just prescribe a pill, but the good news is I don't have a pill. I don't have a pill. But what I do have is a prescription. I'm like a surgeon. I go in, I, identify that exact abandonment wound, multiple places, multiple people, multiple events, like me being bullied, me having an alcoholic father who called me fat and ugly at 4 years old, me having a father that abandoned us, me having an emotional mother that, was not nurturing or affectionate. And so once you diagnose and like find that wound, I'm like a surgeon. I precisely find it. We pull it out and we release it. And we do that through, like I said, certain a multifaceted approaches that I have to get to know you on a one-on-one level, an individual level, in order to prescribe exactly what is right for you in that moment. But there's lots of resources and lots of strategic tools that I implement. So what I do is that I get on a breakthrough phone call. It's the 3 keys to finally feel at peace phone call. And that's what I'm going to do, right? Like I said, I'm like a surgeon, like a surgeon that precisely diagnoses where that wound is, how it's sabotaging your life. Take it out, we take it out, and then you move on, and then you feel better, more content, at peace quicker. So this phone call is for you if traditional therapy has left you stuck. So maybe you have a lot of awareness. Most of my clients have done lots of therapy, lots of inner work, but they still feel stuck. And so here's the other caveat, though. You have to be willing to do intentional, actionable exercises that will quickly transform your life. Because unless you're willing to kind of take the time and energy and invest in yourself and change those patterns, I only want clients who are committed to change, and they just don't know how. They're ready to make the changes. They're willing and able. They just don't know the how. So if you are an action taker and you want a program and you're ready to invest in a program that works because you don't want to waste time. I've got a call after this. Somebody's been in therapy for 4 years. Well, this is not, I don't have graduates that are in my programs for years. It's like, come on, a few months, like, let's get this going. And again, like you heard my testimony from Sam, he has these tools that he can use for the rest of his life. And that's what I want. I want you to be able to like walk out and be like, hey, I know what to do. I know how I'm triggered. I know what I need to do. That's what I love about it too. So I did set aside 45-minute, it's like a 45-minute breakthrough session. So a complimentary session where I give you the 3 keys to finally find inner peace. Now, on this phone call, I'm going to show you the exact abandonment wound, how it's sabotaging your life right now and the relationships, and what you need to do to heal them quickly. I'm also going to give you the 3 steps that you need to set healthy boundaries in your life so that you can stop feeling lonely, stop feeling unworthy, stop all the people pleasing, so that you can feel secure and confident in all your relationships. And it starts with you. And then we're going to give you the strategic roadmap. I'm going to give you kind of like the roadmap that you need. Again, this is individualized to each person that will help you heal. So you'll second guessing yourself, tune into your intuition, and you can feel worthy, confident, AF, and have firm boundaries in all of your relationships. So I've got I'm going to stop the share because I've got our link here. I'm going to post it in our chat box. And then I'm also going to email it out as well. But I do have our link here in the chat box, and you can just copy it out of the chat box. Of course, y'all know you can find me on Facebook Messenger and Instagram Messenger. I'm totally available anywhere. I'm easy to find. But there is the link to my calendar for next week, where we're going to deep dive into what you need. So while you're copying and paste that link, I would love to know your biggest aha or your biggest takeaway from today. And I'm going to